Freedom is one of the most desired human experiences, yet one of the most misunderstood. Most people imagine freedom as the ability to do whatever they want, whenever they want, without restriction. They associate it with money, time, independence, or the removal of external limits. But this interpretation creates a contradiction that very few recognize. The more a person follows every impulse, the less control they actually have. And without control, freedom becomes an illusion rather than a reality. True freedom is not found in the absence of structure. It is found in the presence of control. Specifically, control over thoughts, emotions, attention, and behavior. Without self-control, a person is constantly influenced by external triggers. They react instead of decide. They drift instead of direct, as they respond to circumstances rather than shaping them. In this state, life is not guided by intention but by impulse. Self-control is the mechanism that separates reaction from choice. It creates the space between stimulus and response where real freedom exists. In that space, a person is no longer driven by immediate comfort or emotional pressure. Instead, they can evaluate, decide, and act with purpose. Without that space, behavior becomes automatic, and automatic behavior eventually defines outcomes. Most limitations in life are not imposed externally. They are reinforced internally through repeated decisions that favor short-term satisfaction over long-term direction. Each time a person chooses distraction over focus, avoidance over effort, or emotion over logic, they strengthen patterns that reduce future freedom. Over time, these patterns become invisible chains, habits that feel normal but quietly restrict growth. Self-control is not about suppression or denial. It is about alignment. It ensures that actions match intentions, and intentions align with long-term goals. When self-control is strong, decisions become deliberate rather than reactive. Time is used with purpose. Attention is directed instead of scattered. Emotions are acknowledged but not allowed to dictate outcomes. This shift transforms how life is experienced. Instead of feeling controlled by circumstances, a person begins to feel in control of their direction. Instead of being pulled in multiple directions, they begin to move with clarity. Instead of reacting to life, they begin to shape it. However, self-control is not instinctive in its strongest form, and it must be developed through awareness, structure, and repetition. It requires understanding how impulses form, how habits are built, and how attention can be trained. It also requires recognizing that freedom is not a destination, but a continuous practice of alignment between thought and action. This audiobook will explore that transformation in depth. It will break down why self-control fails, how it can be rebuilt, and how it ultimately becomes the foundation of real freedom. You will understand the psychology behind impulses, the structure of disciplined behavior, and the systems that create long-term consistency. Most importantly, you will learn that freedom is not something you wait for in the future. It is something you construct in every moment through the quality of your decisions. Every action either increases control or weakens it. Every choice either builds structure or breaks it. By the end of this journey, self-control will no longer feel like restriction. It will feel like clarity. It will no longer feel like limitation. It will feel like direction, and it will no longer feel like effort alone, but like the foundation of true freedom itself. Chapter 1. Why people lose self-control. Self-control does not disappear suddenly. It fades gradually through repeated patterns of behavior that seem harmless in the moment but accumulate into long-term weakness. Most people assume they lack discipline because of personality, motivation, or circumstances. In reality, the loss of self-control is usually the result of predictable psychological and environmental forces that shape behavior over time. One of the most powerful causes is the dominance of instant gratification. The human mind is naturally drawn to immediate rewards because they provide quick emotional satisfaction. Whether it is entertainment, social validation, comfort, or avoidance of effort, the brain learns to prefer what feels good now over what benefits the future. This creates a pattern where short-term relief is prioritized over long-term progress. In modern life, this tendency is amplified. Access to instant stimulation is constant. Information, entertainment, and distraction are always available within seconds. As a result, the mind becomes trained to expect immediate responses to desire. When something requires patience or sustained effort, resistance appears. Not because the task is impossible, but because the brain has been conditioned to avoid delay. Self-control weakens further through repeated micro-decisions. It is rarely a single major failure that creates lack of discipline. Instead, it is hundreds of small choices that reinforce impulsive behavior. Choosing to delay a task once feels insignificant. Avoiding responsibility for a short moment feels harmless. Switching attention away from focus seems trivial, but these repeated actions slowly reshape behavioral identity. Over time, the mind learns that avoidance is acceptable and effort is optional. Another major factor is emotional reactivity. When emotions are strong, they influence decision-making more than logic. Stress leads to avoidance. Frustration leads to impulsive reactions. Boredom leads to distraction. Anxiety leads to hesitation. In these moments, behavior becomes reactive rather than intentional. Self-control is not absent because of lack of knowledge, but because emotional pressure overrides deliberate thinking. Closely connected to this is the absence of structured decision-making. Many people move through their day without clear priorities or systems. Without structure, decisions are made in response to external triggers rather than internal direction. The mind constantly shifts attention based on what feels urgent or stimulating in the moment. This creates a cycle of inconsistency where focus is repeatedly broken and never fully restored. Environment also plays a critical role. Surroundings that encourage distraction, reward impulsive behavior, or normalize inconsistency weaken discipline over time. When the environment constantly offers easier alternatives to effort, the path of least resistance becomes the default. In such conditions, self-control is not only a personal challenge but an environmental one. Another overlooked factor is identity reinforcement. People often behave in ways that match how they see themselves. If someone repeatedly acts without discipline, they may begin to internalize the belief that they are not disciplined. Once this identity forms, it influences future behavior, making change more difficult. The mind tends to protect consistency between belief and action, even if that consistency is limiting. Finally, lack of self-control is sustained by unawareness of consequence accumulation. Each individual decision feels small, but the combined effect over time is significant. Because the impact is not immediate, the mind underestimates the cost of repeated impulsive behavior. When this disconnect between action and outcome allows patterns to continue unchecked, till they become deeply embedded habits. Understanding why self-control is lost is not about blame. It is about clarity. Once the real causes are visible, instant gratification, emotional reactivity, lack of structure, environmental influence, identity patterns, and unnoticed accumulation, the path to rebuilding control becomes practical rather than abstract. Self-control is not removed by one force. It is weakened by many small influences acting repeatedly over time, and once this pattern is understood, it can be reversed through deliberate design, awareness, and consistent practice. Chapter 2. The Psychology Behind Self-Control. Self-control is not a matter of willpower alone. It is a psychological system shaped by how the brain evaluates reward, effort, or emotion, and consequence. To understand how to achieve freedom through self-control, it is essential to understand how the mind naturally operates when making decisions. At the core of behavior lies a constant internal calculation between immediate reward and delayed reward. The human brain is naturally biased toward what produces instant satisfaction. This bias is not a weakness in design, it is an efficiency mechanism that historically helped humans respond quickly to immediate needs. However, in modern life, this same mechanism often works against long-term goals. When a decision offers immediate pleasure, the brain releases chemical signals associated with reward and comfort, and this creates a strong reinforcement loop. The more frequently a behavior produces instant satisfaction, the more automatic it becomes. Over time, the brain begins to prioritize these behaviors even when they conflict with long-term outcomes. This is how impulsive patterns are formed at a neurological level. Self-control emerges when the brain strengthens its ability to value delayed outcomes more than immediate ones. This does not happen automatically. It requires repeated mental training where long-term consequences are consciously weighted higher than short-term impulses. Each time a person chooses effort over ease or focus over distraction, they are reshaping this internal reward system. Another important psychological mechanism is the prefrontal cortex function, which is responsible for planning, decision-making, and impulse regulation. When this system is strong and actively engaged, behavior becomes more deliberate. When it is overwhelmed by stress, fatigue, or emotional pressure, impulse-driven systems take over. This is why self-control often weakens under emotional or mental strain. Emotions play a central role in decision-making. They act as accelerators for behavior. When emotions are intense, they compress the gap between impulse and action. A person does not pause to evaluate consequences, they act to relieve the emotional state. This creates reactive behavior patterns that override rational thinking. Understanding this mechanism is critical because it reveals that many failures of self-control are actually failures of emotional regulation. Attention is another core element. The mind cannot act on what it does not focus on. Wherever attention goes, behavior follows. When attention is fragmented across multiple stimuli, decision quality decreases. When attention is focused, or behavior becomes aligned with intention. This is why distraction is one of the most powerful disruptors of self-control. It does not just interrupt focus, it reshapes behavior itself. Habits also form a foundational layer in the psychology of self-control. A habit is a behavior that has been repeated until it becomes automatic. Once formed, habits reduce the need for conscious decision-making. This can either strengthen or weaken self-control depending on the nature of the habit. Disciplined habits reduce mental effort, while impulsive habits increase behavioral instability. The mind also operates through cognitive shortcuts, which are mental patterns that simplify decision-making. These shortcuts are efficient but not always optimal. They often favor comfort, familiarity, or emotional relief over strategic thinking. Without awareness, these shortcuts guide behavior automatically, reinforcing patterns that may not align with long-term goals. Another psychological factor is the perception of identity. People tend to behave in ways that align with how they define themselves. If the internal identity is associated with inconsistency or lack of discipline, behavior will naturally follow that pattern. Conversely, when identity shifts towards structure and control, actions begin to align with that perception. Identity does not just reflect behavior, it actively shapes it. Finally, the psychology of self-control is deeply influenced by feedback loops. Every action produces a consequence, and that consequence reinforces future behavior. Positive reinforcement strengthens repetition, while negative outcomes can either discourage or, if ignored, fail to correct behavior. Over time, these loops determine whether discipline or impulsivity becomes dominant. In summary, self-control is not a single skill but a system of psychological mechanisms working together. It is shaped by reward processing, emotional regulation, attention control, habit formation, identity perception, and feedback loops. Understanding these mechanisms removes the illusion that self-control is purely motivational. It reveals that it is structural, trainable, and deeply connected to how the mind is designed to operate. Once this psychology is understood, the next step is learning how to build practical systems that transform awareness into consistent, disciplined behavior. Chapter 3. Building systems for self-control. Self-control is often mistaken for a constant act of resistance. Key as if discipline depends on endlessly fighting impulses in real time. In reality, sustainable self-control does not come from constant struggle. It comes from systems that reduce the need for struggle in the first place. When behavior is structured properly, discipline stops being a daily battle and becomes a default operating pattern. A system is a designed sequence of actions that guides behavior without requiring constant decision-making. Without systems, every action becomes a negotiation between impulse and intention. With systems, many decisions are already made in advance, reducing the mental load and limiting opportunities for inconsistency. This shift is critical for achieving long-term freedom through self-control. The first step in building effective systems is removing unnecessary decisions. Decision fatigue weakens discipline. The more choices the mind must make throughout the day, the more likely it is to default to comfort or distraction. By structuring routines in advance, such as fixed times for work, rest, and focused effort, mental energy is preserved for meaningful decisions rather than trivial ones. A strong system also relies on environmental design. Behavior is heavily influenced by surroundings. If distractions are easily accessible, self-control is constantly tested. If the environment is structured to support focus and reduce friction for productive actions, discipline becomes significantly easier. This includes organizing physical space, controlling digital inputs, and minimizing triggers that lead to impulsive behavior. Another essential component is trigger-based action design. Instead of relying on motivation, systems are built around cues that automatically initiate behavior. For example, a specific time of day, a location, or a preceding action can act as a trigger for a disciplined routine. When behavior is tied to consistent cues, it becomes more automatic and less dependent on emotional state. Self-control systems also require friction management. Friction refers to the effort required to perform or avoid a behavior. To strengthen discipline, friction should be reduced for productive actions and increased for unproductive ones. This could mean making important tasks easier to start while making distractions slightly harder to access. Even small adjustments in friction significantly influence behavior over time. Consistency is another critical principle. Systems only become effective through repetition. A single day of discipline has limited impact, but repeated execution creates behavioral stability. The goal is not perfection, but continuity. Even imperfect execution reinforces the system, while inconsistency weakens it regardless of intent. Tracking behavior also strengthens self-control systems. When actions are visible, patterns become clear. Awareness of consistency, progress, and deviation allows for correction before small issues become long-term habits. Tracking is not about judgment, it is about feedback. It transforms abstract intentions into measurable behavior. Another important element is constraint-based design. Instead of relying on motivation to make the right choice, systems can limit available options. When fewer choices are available, the likelihood of impulsive decisions decreases. Constraints simplify behavior by removing unnecessary alternatives that lead to distraction or inconsistency. Systems must also account for emotional variability. Since emotional states fluctuate, relying on willpower alone is unstable. Effective systems remain functional regardless of mood, stress, or energy levels. This stability ensures that disciplined behavior continues even when internal conditions are not ideal. Finally, systems must evolve. As behavior stabilizes, systems should be refined and adjusted. What works at one stage may become inefficient at another. Continuous improvement ensures that systems remain aligned with goals, capabilities, and changing environments. In essence, self-control is not sustained by force but by structure. Key systems reduce reliance on moment-to-moment decision-making and replace it with predictable patterns of action. When designed correctly, they transform discipline from a struggle into a natural outcome of environment, routine, and design. With systems in place, the next step is understanding how to control impulses directly in real-time situations where discipline is most tested. Chapter 4. Mastering Impulse Control in Real Time. Even with strong systems in place, life still presents moments where discipline is tested instantly. These are the situations where plans collide with impulses and where long-term intention competes directly with short-term desire. Real mastery of self-control is revealed not in structured environments but in these unpredictable moments where decisions must be made quickly and without preparation. Impulse is the brain's automatic response to stimulation. It is fast, emotional, and often focused on immediate relief or reward. It does not wait for analysis. It pushes for action before reflection occurs. This is why impulse feels powerful. It operates faster than deliberate thinking. To master self-control, the goal is not to eliminate impulse, but to create a buffer between impulse and action. That buffer is awareness. The moment an impulse appears, there is a brief window where recognition is possible before action is taken. Most people lose control not because they cannot resist, but because they do not recognize the impulse early enough. Training awareness means learning to detect the first signs of urge before it becomes behavior. Once awareness is present, the next step is interruption. Impulses thrive on momentum. If uninterrupted, they naturally move toward action. But when the pattern is broken, even briefly, the intensity decreases. This interruption can take many forms: pausing, changing focus, shifting physical position, or mentally labeling the impulse without acting on it. The key is not the method, but the disruption of automatic flow. After interruption comes delay. Delaying action weakens impulse strength significantly. Many urges feel urgent in the moment but lose power over time. By introducing even a short delay between feeling and acting, the emotional intensity begins to decline, allowing rational thinking to regain control. This delay creates space for intentional decision-making to re-enter the process. Another important element is reframing the impulse. Instead of viewing an urge as something that must be acted upon or suppressed, it can be observed as temporary mental activity. This shift in perspective reduces its authority. The impulse is no longer a command, it becomes information. When treated as information rather than instruction, its power over behavior decreases. Physical state also plays a critical role in impulse control. The body and mind are closely linked. Fatigue, stress, and overstimulation weaken control mechanisms, making impulses harder to resist. In contrast, stable breathing, posture adjustment, and physical grounding can restore clarity. Small physical resets can interrupt emotional escalation and support rational decision-making. Environment again becomes important in real-time control. Many impulses are triggered by external cues, objects, digital stimuli, or situations. Recognizing these triggers allows for immediate adjustment of position or focus. Changing environment, even slightly, can break the pattern that sustains impulsive behavior. Another powerful technique is identity reinforcement in the moment. Instead of asking, "Should I do this?" the question becomes, "What would a controlled, disciplined version of me do right now?" This shift connects action to identity rather than emotion. Identity-based decisions are more stable than impulse-based ones because they are guided by long-term self-perception. Attention redirection is also essential. Impulses survive when attention remains fixed on them. Shifting attention toward a different task, thought, or sensory input reduces their intensity. Attention is not passive, it is directional. Where it moves, energy follows. Controlling attention is therefore one of the fastest ways to regain control over behavior. Finally, mastery of impulse control requires acceptance of discomfort. Many impulses are driven by the desire to escape discomfort, boredom, tension, uncertainty, or effort. Learning to remain present without immediately escaping discomfort is a key aspect of real-time self-control. This does not mean suppressing feelings, but allowing them to exist without automatically responding to them. In essence, mastering impulse control is about creating space between feeling and action. Within that space lies freedom, the ability to choose rather than react. When this skill is developed, even unpredictable moments no longer threaten discipline. Instead, they become opportunities to reinforce control, strengthen awareness, and build long-term stability. With real-time control established, the next step is understanding how emotions influence discipline and how they can be regulated to support long-term freedom. Chapter 5. Emotional Regulation and Self-Control. Self-control is often imagined as a battle against impulses, but in practice, many of those impulses are driven by something deeper: emotion. Emotions are not separate from decision-making, they are embedded within it. They shape perception, accelerate behavior, and often determine actions before conscious reasoning has time to respond. Because of this, emotional regulation becomes one of the most critical foundations of lasting self-control. Emotions themselves are not the problem. They are natural signals produced by the mind and body in response to internal and external events. The challenge arises when emotions begin to dictate behavior without awareness or regulation. In such cases, actions become reactions, and reactions are rarely aligned with long-term intention. One of the most common emotional disruptors of self-control is stress. Under stress, the mind shifts focus from long-term planning to immediate relief. This creates a narrowing of attention where only short-term solutions feel acceptable. As a result, disciplined choices feel heavier while impulsive choices feel easier. If this pattern repeats, stress becomes a consistent trigger for weakened control. Another powerful emotional force is frustration. When expectations are not met or progress feels slow, frustration builds internal pressure. This pressure often seeks release through quick actions, distraction, avoidance, or abrupt decisions. And instead of solving the underlying issue, the mind prioritizes emotional relief, which can reinforce unproductive patterns over time. Boredom also plays a significant role. In moments of low stimulation, the mind naturally searches for activity. Without intentional direction, it gravitates toward the fastest source of stimulation available. This can lead to unnecessary distraction or impulsive behavior simply to escape mental stillness. Boredom is not inactivity, it is an emotional state that demands management. Effective emotional regulation begins with recognition. Most emotional reactions influence behavior before they are consciously identified. Developing awareness means learning to notice emotional shifts as they begin, rather than after they have already shaped action. This awareness creates the first layer of control, entered where emotion is observed instead of immediately acted upon. Once emotions are recognized, the next step is separation. This means creating distance between what is felt and what is done. An emotion may arise, but it does not have to define the response. This separation is essential because it restores choice. Without it, behavior becomes automatic and reactive. With it, behavior becomes intentional. Breathing and physiological control are powerful tools in this process. Emotional intensity is closely linked to physical state. Rapid breathing, tension, and restlessness often intensify emotional reactions. By consciously slowing breathing and relaxing the body, the intensity of emotion decreases, making it easier to think clearly and act deliberately. Another key principle is reframing emotional meaning. Emotions often carry interpretations. Stress may signal pressure, frustration may signal failure, boredom may signal emptiness. These interpretations can be challenged and restructured. For example, stress can be reframed as readiness, frustration as feedback, and boredom as an opportunity for redirection. This shift reduces emotional dominance over behavior. Attention control also plays a major role in emotional regulation. Emotions grow stronger when attention is continuously focused on them. By redirecting attention toward constructive tasks or neutral observation, emotional intensity naturally decreases. Attention is not passive, it amplifies whatever it focuses on. Learning to redirect it is a key skill in maintaining control. Another important factor is delayed response. Our emotional impulses often push for immediate expression or action. Introducing a pause between feeling and responding allows the emotional intensity to settle. Even a short delay can significantly reduce reactive behavior and increase clarity in decision-making. Long-term emotional regulation also depends on internal stability. This includes consistent routines, adequate rest, structured thinking, and controlled environments. When the body and mind are stabilized, emotional fluctuations become easier to manage. Without stability, even small triggers can create disproportionate reactions. Finally, emotional regulation is strengthened through practice. It is not a one-time skill, but a continuous process of observation, adjustment, and refinement. Over time, the gap between emotion and action expands. In that gap, self-control becomes stronger, decisions become more deliberate, and behavior becomes increasingly aligned with intention. In essence, emotional regulation is not about suppressing feelings. It is about understanding them, observing them, and preventing them from automatically controlling behavior. When emotions are no longer the driver of action, self-control becomes stable, consistent, and deeply reliable. With emotional regulation established, the next step is learning how to build long-term discipline systems that sustain self-control even in changing conditions. Chapter 6. Building long-term discipline. Self-control becomes truly powerful when it stops relying on momentary effort and starts operating through structure. Willpower alone is unstable. It fluctuates with energy, mood, stress, and environment. And this is why many people feel disciplined at times and completely inconsistent at others. Long-term freedom through self-control is not built on motivation or force. It is built on systems that make discipline the default behavior rather than the exception. A discipline system is a structured way of organizing actions so that the right behavior requires less decision-making and less resistance over time. Instead of constantly choosing what to do, the system guides behavior automatically. This reduces internal conflict and removes unnecessary negotiation between impulse and intention. The foundation of any long-term system is consistency of structure. The mind responds strongly to repetition. When actions are repeated in a predictable sequence, they become easier to perform. Over time, the brain begins to treat repeated behavior as normal rather than optional. This reduces friction and strengthens stability in decision-making. One of the most important elements of a discipline system is routine design. A routine is not just a schedule, it is a behavioral pathway. It determines what happens after waking, how attention is directed during the day, and how energy is allocated. When routines are structured properly, they reduce reliance on real-time decisions, which are often vulnerable to distraction or impulse. Another key component is environmental alignment. Behavior is heavily influenced by surroundings. A well-designed environment supports discipline without requiring constant effort. This can include organizing spaces to reduce distraction, structuring digital environments to limit unnecessary stimulation, and creating conditions where focused action is easier than avoidance. Discipline systems also rely on cue-based behavior. Instead of relying on motivation, actions are linked to specific triggers. These cues can be time-based, location-based, or action-based. When a cue appears, it automatically initiates a behavior. Over time, this reduces hesitation and strengthens consistency. The goal is to reduce thinking at the moment of action and replace it with automatic initiation. A critical but often overlooked part of discipline systems is friction management. Friction refers to the effort required to perform or avoid an action. To strengthen discipline, friction should be reduced for productive behaviors and increased for unproductive ones. Small changes in friction can significantly influence long-term behavior without requiring conscious resistance. Another essential principle is progress tracking. When behavior becomes visible, patterns become easier to understand. Tracking creates awareness of consistency, gaps, and improvement over time. This awareness reinforces discipline because it turns abstract intention into measurable reality. What is measured becomes easier to manage and improve. Discipline systems must also include recovery structure. No system is perfect and inconsistency will occur. The strength of a system is not measured by perfection, but by how quickly it restores stability after disruption. A strong system anticipates failure points and includes mechanisms to return to structure without long-term deviation. Not long-term discipline also depends on energy management. Self-control is closely tied to mental and physical energy. When energy is low, resistance increases and impulsive behavior becomes more likely. Systems that include rest, recovery, and balanced effort cycles help maintain consistent performance over time. Another key factor is simplification. Complex systems often fail because they require too much cognitive effort to maintain. Effective discipline systems are simple, clear, and easy to follow. The fewer decisions required, the more likely the system will be sustained consistently. Finally, discipline systems evolve over time. As behavior becomes stable, systems must be refined to match new goals, environments, and capabilities. Static systems eventually lose effectiveness. Continuous adjustment ensures that structure remains aligned with long-term direction. In essence, long-term discipline is not about forcing behavior through constant effort. It is about designing systems that make disciplined action natural, repeatable, and stable. When systems are properly built, self-control is no longer something that must be constantly applied. It becomes embedded in how life is organized and executed. With systems established, the next step is understanding how identity shapes behavior and how lasting freedom is created through identity-based self-control. Chapter 7: Identity and Self-Control. Transformation. Self-control is often treated as a behavioral challenge, something to manage through effort, routines, and systems. But beneath all of these lies a deeper force that determines whether discipline lasts or collapses: identity. What a person consistently does is not only shaped by what they want, but by who they believe they are. When identity changes, behavior follows naturally. Without identity change, even strong systems eventually weaken under pressure. Identity is the internal definition a person holds about themselves. It is not always spoken or consciously analyzed, but it operates continuously in the background of decision-making. Every action either reinforces or contradicts this internal definition. Over time, the mind prefers consistency between belief and behavior, even if that consistency limits growth. This is why many attempts at self-control fail. People try to change actions without changing identity, and they attempt to act disciplined while still thinking of themselves as inconsistent. This creates internal conflict. In the short term, effort may produce results, but in the long term, the old identity pulls behavior back to familiar patterns. True transformation begins when identity shifts from someone who tries to be disciplined to someone who acts with discipline as a default. This is not a motivational statement, it is a psychological reorientation. When discipline becomes part of identity, behavior no longer requires constant negotiation. It becomes aligned with self-perception. The brain constantly seeks confirmation of identity. If a person believes they are inconsistent, their mind unconsciously looks for behavior that validates that belief. If they believe they are structured and controlled, and they begin to interpret situations through that lens and act accordingly. This feedback loop is powerful because it quietly reinforces itself over time. One of the most effective ways to reshape identity is through consistent action repetition. Small, repeated, disciplined actions send signals to the brain that a new pattern is forming. Each action is not just a task completed, it is evidence that supports a new identity. Over time, these repetitions accumulate and redefine self-perception. Language also plays a subtle but important role. The way a person describes themselves influences how they behave. Internal statements like, "I always lose focus," or "I am not consistent," strengthen limiting identity patterns. Replacing these with action-based descriptions shifts focus from fixed identity to evolving behavior. Instead of labeling identity, attention moves toward execution. Environment again reinforces identity. People tend to behave in ways that match the expectations of their surroundings. If the environment reflects discipline, structure, and order, it becomes easier to maintain those traits internally. If the environment reflects chaos or distraction, maintaining control becomes more difficult. Identity is constantly influenced by context. Another important factor is evidence accumulation. The mind builds identity based on repeated proof. One disciplined action has limited impact, but repeated disciplined actions create a pattern that the mind can no longer ignore. Eventually, identity adjusts to match accumulated behavior rather than isolated intention. Identity transformation also requires letting go of outdated self-definitions. Not many people remain attached to past versions of themselves, even when those versions no longer serve their goals. This attachment creates resistance to change because new behavior feels unfamiliar or inconsistent with the old identity. Growth requires willingness to allow identity to evolve beyond past limitations. Importantly, identity does not change through force. It changes through alignment. When actions, environment, thoughts, and routines consistently point in the same direction, identity gradually shifts to match them. This process is subtle but powerful. It does not rely on dramatic transformation, but on sustained consistency. Once identity begins to shift, self-control becomes significantly easier. Discipline no longer feels like resistance because it aligns with self-perception. Decisions become faster. Internal conflict decreases and behavior becomes more stable across different conditions. In essence, identity is the foundation upon which all self-control is built. Systems, routines, and emotional regulation are important, but they become truly stable only when they support a consistent internal identity. When identity and behavior are aligned, discipline stops being an effort and starts becoming a natural expression of who a person is. With identity transformation in place, the next step is learning how to handle pressure, distractions, and external challenges without losing control. Chapter 8. Mastering discipline under pressure. Pressure is where self-control is truly tested. It is one thing to remain disciplined in calm conditions when time is available and distractions are minimal. It is something entirely different to maintain control when urgency increases, expectations rise, or emotions intensify. Under pressure, the mind compresses time, narrows focus, and pushes toward fast relief rather than thoughtful action. This is where discipline either stabilizes or collapses. Pressure does not create weakness, it reveals it. It exposes whether self-control is built on stable structure or temporary effort. When pressure increases, many people shift from deliberate thinking to reactive behavior. The gap between impulse and action becomes smaller, and decisions are made with less reflection. This is why stressful situations often lead to regretful choices. Mastering discipline under pressure begins with slowing internal response time. Even when external conditions demand speed, the internal process can remain controlled. The ability to pause mentally before responding is one of the strongest indicators of self-mastery. That pause creates space for evaluation rather than reaction. In that space, clarity replaces urgency. Breathing control is one of the simplest but most powerful tools under pressure. When stress increases, breathing becomes shallow and rapid, signaling the body to enter a reactive state. By consciously slowing breathing, the nervous system shifts towards stability. This physiological adjustment directly improves clarity, decision-making, and emotional control, even in demanding situations. Another key factor is attention anchoring. Pressure often scatters attention across multiple concerns at once: time constraints, potential outcomes, external expectations. This fragmentation weakens control. Anchoring attention on a single point of focus, such as the next immediate action, restores clarity. Instead of thinking about everything at once, the mind operates step by step, reducing overwhelm. Preparation also plays a critical role. Pressure feels stronger when situations are unfamiliar or unstructured. When systems, routines, and responses are already practiced, the mind does not need to improvise under stress. Familiarity reduces uncertainty, and reduced uncertainty lowers emotional intensity. Preparation does not eliminate pressure, but it significantly reduces its disruptive effect. Reframing pressure is another important strategy. Instead of interpreting pressure as threat, it can be understood as activation of capability. Pressure often signals that something important is at stake. When viewed correctly, it becomes a signal to focus rather than a trigger for panic. This shift in interpretation changes emotional response and improves performance under demanding conditions. Decision simplification is essential in high-pressure moments. Complex thinking slows response and increases hesitation. Under pressure, effective control comes from reducing decisions to their most essential form. What is the immediate priority? What action moves things forward right now? By narrowing focus, the mind avoids overload and maintains clarity. Another important element is emotional containment. Pressure often amplifies emotions such as anxiety, frustration, or urgency. Instead of suppressing these emotions, mastery involves containing them, acknowledging their presence without allowing them to dictate behavior. This separation ensures that emotion is observed but not obeyed. Physical posture also influences mental control. Under pressure, the body tends to contract or tense, which reinforces stress. Maintaining an open, stable posture signals control to both the mind and body. This physical adjustment supports psychological stability and improves response quality. Experience gradually strengthens discipline under pressure. Each time a person successfully navigates a high-stress situation without losing control, the mind records that outcome. Over time, this builds confidence and reduces sensitivity to pressure. What once felt overwhelming begins to feel manageable through repetition and familiarity. Ultimately, mastering discipline under pressure is not about eliminating stress. It is about maintaining structure within it. Pressure will always exist in demanding environments, But its impact depends on internal control systems. When response time, attention, emotion, and decision-making are stabilized, pressure becomes manageable rather than disruptive. In essence, pressure does not break self-control. It reveals whether it has been properly developed. With the right internal mechanisms, even intense situations can be navigated with clarity, precision, and discipline. With pressure mastery established, the next step is learning how to sustain self-control consistently over long periods without burnout or decline. Chapter 9. Sustaining long-term self-control without burnout. Self-control is often imagined as constant effort, pushing, resisting, forcing discipline at every moment. While this approach may work temporarily, it is not sustainable. Over time, excessive reliance on force leads to mental fatigue, emotional depletion, and eventual breakdown of discipline. True mastery of self-control is not about intensity alone, but about sustainability. It is the ability to remain consistent without burning out or losing clarity. Burnout occurs when the mind is forced to operate continuously at high resistance without recovery. Every act of discipline requires energy. Every decision to resist impulse consumes mental resources. If there is no balance between effort and recovery, those resources gradually diminish. As they decline, self-control weakens, and impulsive behavior becomes more likely. Sustaining self-control begins with understanding that discipline is not meant to be constant strain. It must be structured in a way that allows natural cycles of effort and recovery. Just as physical strength improves through rest between training, mental discipline strengthens through balanced periods of focus and restoration. One of the most important principles in long-term control is pacing. Pacing refers to the distribution of effort over time. Instead of applying maximum discipline in every moment, effective self-control involves strategic allocation of energy. High focus periods are followed by recovery periods. This prevents mental overload and preserves consistency. Another key factor is energy awareness. Self-control is heavily influenced by physical and mental energy levels. When energy is high, discipline feels natural and stable. When energy is low, even simple decisions feel difficult. Recognizing these fluctuations allows behavior to be adjusted intelligently rather than forcefully. Instead of expecting constant peak performance, sustainable control adapts to internal states. Rest is not a reward for discipline, it is a requirement for it. Without proper rest, cognitive function declines, emotional regulation weakens, and impulse control deteriorates. Quality sleep, mental breaks, and periods of low stimulation are essential for restoring the systems that support discipline. Ignoring rest does not strengthen self-control, it slowly undermines it. Another important aspect is removing unnecessary resistance. Many people unintentionally make discipline harder than it needs to be by overcomplicating routines or maintaining unrealistic expectations. Sustainable self-control is built on simplicity. The fewer internal conflicts and unnecessary rules there are, the easier it becomes to remain consistent over time. But emotional balance also plays a role in preventing burnout. Constant suppression of emotion creates internal pressure. Over time, this pressure builds and leads to exhaustion. Sustainable self-control does not rely on suppression, but on regulation. Emotions are acknowledged, processed, and managed rather than ignored or forced down. This creates internal stability. Variety within structure is another important element. Repetition without variation can lead to mental fatigue. While systems should remain consistent, small variations in approach, environment, or method can maintain engagement. This prevents discipline from becoming rigid or mentally draining while preserving structure. Long-term self-control also requires realistic expectation setting. Many people lose discipline not because they lack ability, but because they expect perfection. When perfection becomes the standard, small failures feel like total breakdowns. This leads to discouragement and abandonment of structure. Sustainable discipline accepts inconsistency as part of the process and focuses on long-term trends rather than individual moments. Recovery from setbacks is equally important. No system of self-control is flawless. There will be moments of distraction, emotional reaction, or inconsistency. The key is not avoiding these moments entirely, but returning to structure quickly. The speed of recovery determines long-term stability more than perfection ever could. Finally, sustainability comes from alignment rather than force. When self-control aligns with identity, systems, and environment, it requires less effort to maintain. Behavior becomes more natural, less forced, and more integrated into daily life. This reduces resistance and allows discipline to operate continuously without exhaustion. In essence, long-term self-control is not about pushing harder indefinitely. It is about creating balance between effort and recovery, structure and flexibility, intensity and rest. When this balance is achieved, discipline becomes stable, consistent, and sustainable over time. With sustainability established, the next step is learning how self-control ultimately leads to true freedom, both internal and external, when fully mastered. Chapter 10. Freedom as the outcome of self-control. Freedom is often misunderstood as the absence of restriction. People imagine it as a state where there are no rules, no limits, and no demands. But in practice, a life without structure does not create freedom. It creates instability. Without control, attention becomes scattered, decisions become reactive, and behavior becomes dependent on impulse rather than intention. What appears as freedom on the surface often becomes internal chaos over time. True freedom is not the absence of control, it is the presence of self-control so strong that external conditions no longer dominate behavior. When a person develops internal discipline, they are no longer controlled by distractions, emotions, or momentary impulses. Instead, they gain the ability to choose their actions deliberately, regardless of external pressure or internal fluctuation. Self-control creates freedom because it removes dependency on impulse. Without self-control, behavior is dictated by immediate desire, and a person reacts to what feels easiest, most comfortable, or most emotionally rewarding in the moment. This creates patterns that feel spontaneous but are actually repetitive and limiting. Over time, these patterns reduce options rather than expand them. When self-control is developed, a critical shift occurs. Reaction is replaced by choice. Instead of automatically responding to impulses, there is a moment of awareness where action is evaluated. In that moment, multiple possibilities exist. This is where freedom actually lives, not in unrestricted behavior, but in the ability to consciously select direction. Another way self-control creates freedom is by stabilizing attention. Without control, attention is constantly pulled outward by distractions. This fragmentation reduces clarity and weakens decision-making. With strong self-control, attention becomes directed and intentional. This allows deeper focus, better thinking, and more meaningful progress. The result is not restriction, but expansion of capability. Self-control also frees a person from emotional volatility. When emotions dominate behavior, life becomes reactive. Decisions change based on mood, stress, or external influence. This creates inconsistency and unpredictability in outcomes. With emotional regulation, behavior becomes stable, regardless of internal fluctuations. This stability creates reliability, both internally and externally. Freedom also emerges through time control. Without self-control, time is often consumed by distraction, avoidance, and unstructured activity. Hours pass without direction. With discipline, time becomes organized and purposeful. Some actions are prioritized based on value rather than impulse. This creates a sense of expanded time, where more meaningful outcomes are achieved within the same duration. Another important dimension of freedom is mental clarity. A mind without control is often cluttered with unfinished thoughts, distractions, and unresolved impulses. This mental noise reduces the ability to think clearly and make decisions efficiently. Self-control reduces this noise by limiting unnecessary input and focusing attention on what matters. The result is clarity of thought and simplicity of decision-making. Self-control also increases freedom in relationships and communication. When behavior is impulsive, reactions can damage trust, create misunderstandings, or lead to unnecessary conflict. When behavior is controlled, communication becomes deliberate, measured, and strategic. This improves connection, reduces friction, and strengthens influence. Importantly, self-control does not eliminate desire, it refines it. Instead of being driven by every passing impulse, desire becomes filtered through intention and long-term vision. This allows a person to pursue goals that align with their deeper direction rather than short-term emotional states. At its highest level, self-control transforms identity. A person no longer sees themselves as someone trying to stay disciplined, but as someone who naturally operates with structure, awareness, and intention. This identity shift removes internal conflict. Actions become aligned with self-perception, and discipline becomes effortless rather than forced. Ultimately, freedom through self-control is not about doing less. It is about choosing better. It is the ability to act without being controlled by distraction, emotion, or impulse. It is the ability to remain stable under pressure, focused in chaos, and intentional in every decision. In this state, freedom is no longer something external to chase. It becomes an internal condition built through awareness, reinforced through discipline, and sustained through structure. Self-control does not limit life, it defines it. And when fully developed, it does not restrict freedom, it creates it. Chapter 11. Self-mastery. The final stage of freedom through self-control. At a certain point in the development of self-control, the focus shifts. It is no longer about resisting impulses, building systems, or managing emotions as separate tasks. Instead, everything begins to merge into a single integrated state of awareness and action. When this is the stage of self-mastery, where control is no longer something actively applied in moments of difficulty, but something that defines the way a person naturally operates. Self-mastery is not perfection. It is not the absence of mistakes, distractions, or emotional fluctuations. It is the ability to remain centered despite them. A person at this stage does not rely on constant effort to stay disciplined. Instead, discipline becomes the baseline from which behavior flows. The first defining quality of self-mastery is automatic alignment between intention and action. In earlier stages of development, there is often a gap between what a person wants to do and what they actually do. That gap is where internal conflict exists. In self-mastery, that gap becomes smaller and eventually nearly disappears. Action follows intention with minimal resistance. This does not happen by force. It happens through repetition, structure, identity alignment, and emotional regulation, becoming deeply embedded into behavior. Over time, the mind no longer sees disciplined action as separate from personal choice. It becomes the default response. Another defining characteristic is stability under changing conditions. Life is unpredictable. Circumstances shift, pressures increase, and external demands fluctuate. In most people, these changes create instability in behavior, but in self-mastery, external change does not disrupt internal control. The individual remains steady because their behavior is not dependent on environment, but on internal structure. Attention becomes highly refined at this stage. Instead of being scattered or reactive, it becomes intentional and selective. The mind no longer engages with everything it encounters. It filters input based on relevance, purpose, and direction. This creates mental clarity that allows faster, more accurate decision-making without unnecessary cognitive noise. Emotional regulation also reaches a deeper level. Emotions still arise, but they no longer dominate behavior. They are processed with awareness rather than reacted to impulsively. This creates emotional neutrality in high-pressure situations, allowing decisions to remain consistent regardless of internal fluctuations. Another important aspect of self-mastery is the absence of internal negotiation. In earlier stages, much of self-control is spent negotiating between impulse and discipline. Should I do this now or later? Should I resist this urge or follow it? In self-mastery, this negotiation largely disappears because behavior has already been aligned with identity and structure. The decision is already made before the moment arrives. Time perception also changes significantly. Instead of reacting to time as something that pressures or controls behavior, time becomes a structured resource. Actions are placed intentionally within it. This creates a sense of direction and flow rather than urgency and fragmentation. Importantly, self-mastery brings a shift in motivation. External motivation becomes less important because internal structure is strong enough to sustain action. Discipline is no longer dependent on emotional highs or external encouragement. It is maintained through clarity of purpose and consistency of identity. At this stage, these setbacks lose their power to disrupt long-term direction. A mistake is no longer seen as failure of identity, but as temporary deviation from structure. Recovery becomes immediate rather than emotional. The system corrects itself quickly because it is stable at its foundation. Self-mastery also transforms relationships with effort. Effort is no longer perceived as resistance. It becomes a natural part of progress. There is no internal conflict between ease and discipline, because discipline has become the easier path due to familiarity and structure. Ultimately, self-mastery represents the point where self-control is no longer something practiced consciously in every moment. It becomes embedded in identity, reinforced by systems, stabilized by emotional regulation, and expressed through consistent behavior. At this level, freedom is not something pursued, it is something lived. There is freedom from impulsive behavior, freedom from emotional instability, freedom from scattered attention, and freedom from internal conflict. What remains is clarity, direction, and deliberate action. Self-control begins as effort, it develops into structure, and in its final form it becomes identity itself. Self-mastery is not the end of discipline, it is the point where discipline and life become the same thing. Chapter 12. Living in Lasting Freedom. The Integrated Life. At this stage, self-control is no longer a technique being applied. It is no longer a system being maintained or a skill being consciously managed. It becomes something quieter and deeper, a way of living that no longer feels like effort. This is the integrated life, where freedom is not something occasionally experienced, but something consistently expressed through every decision, action, and response. Lasting freedom is not defined by external circumstances. It is defined by internal stability that remains consistent regardless of environment. Life will always present change, unexpected events, shifting demands, and unpredictable challenges. The difference at this stage is not the absence of disruption, but the absence of internal collapse when disruption occurs. In an integrated life, self-control is no longer fragmented into separate areas such as discipline, emotional regulation, attention management, or habit building. Instead, all of these elements operate together as one unified system. Thought influences action smoothly. Emotion is acknowledged without disruption. Attention remains directed without excessive effort. Behavior aligns with intention almost naturally. One of the most important characteristics of this stage is effortless consistency. Earlier stages of development often involve conscious struggle to maintain discipline. There is resistance, negotiation, and constant adjustment. But in an integrated state, consistency no longer depends on motivation or force. It becomes the default pattern of behavior, requiring less internal conflict and less conscious intervention. This does not mean life becomes rigid or mechanical. Instead, it becomes fluid with direction. Flexibility still exists, but it is guided by intention rather than impulse. Adaptation still occurs, but without losing structure. This balance between stability and adaptability is what creates true long-term freedom. Attention at this stage is highly refined. The mind is no longer constantly pulled in multiple directions by irrelevant stimuli. Instead, attention is selective, intentional, and stable. This allows deeper engagement with tasks, clearer thinking, and more efficient decision-making. The mind is not overloaded because it has learned what to ignore as much as what to focus on. Emotional experience also becomes more stable. Emotions are still present, but they no longer create dramatic shifts in behavior. There is awareness without attachment. This means emotions are experienced fully but do not dictate direction. The result is emotional clarity rather than emotional suppression or emotional reactivity. Time is experienced differently in an integrated life. It is no longer something that feels fragmented or rushed. Instead, it becomes structured and intentional. Actions are placed with purpose, transitions are smoother, and there is a reduced sense of internal pressure. This creates a feeling of alignment between time and behavior. Another defining feature is the reduction of internal noise. In earlier stages, much of mental energy is spent managing conflict between impulse and discipline. In an integrated state, that conflict is largely resolved. Decisions require less internal debate because the direction is already established. This creates mental space for clarity, creativity, and strategic thinking. Relationships also change at this level. Communication becomes more intentional, less reactive, and more stable. Because internal control is strong, external interactions are less likely to be driven by emotional instability or impulsive reactions. And this creates more consistent and reliable connections with others. Importantly, the integrated life is not the absence of challenges. It is the ability to move through challenges without losing internal structure. Pressure, uncertainty, and complexity still exist, but they no longer disrupt the foundation of behavior. Instead, they are processed within a stable, internal framework. Freedom in this stage is no longer something pursued or defended. It is something expressed naturally through how life is lived. There is freedom from compulsive behavior, freedom from scattered attention, freedom from emotional instability, and freedom from constant internal negotiation. What remains is clarity of direction, stability of mind, and consistency of action. Self-control, once a deliberate effort, has become an integrated part of identity and lifestyle. The journey from impulse-driven behavior to integrated living is not sudden. It is built through awareness, structure, repetition, emotional regulation, identity alignment, and consistent refinement over time. Each stage adds a layer until control is no longer something applied, but something embodied. In the end, achieving freedom through self-control is not about becoming restricted or rigid. It is about becoming internally stable enough that external conditions no longer define your direction. It is about living with intention rather than reaction, clarity rather than confusion, and structure rather than chaos. This is the final stage of self-control. Not struggle, not effort, but integration, where freedom and discipline become the same thing experienced from different angles of the same life. Chapter 13. Beyond Control and Mastering Flow, Awareness, and Inner Autonomy. At the deepest level of self-control, something subtle begins to change. What once felt like discipline, structure, and conscious effort starts to soften into a more natural state of awareness. Control is no longer experienced as resistance against impulses, because impulses themselves lose much of their disruptive power. Instead of fighting internal conflict, there is a quiet clarity that allows action to arise with precision and ease. This is the transition into what can be described as inner autonomy, a state where behavior is guided by awareness rather than struggle. In earlier stages, self-control is about managing competing forces, impulse versus intention, emotion versus logic, distraction versus focus. But as mastery deepens, these forces no longer feel separate. The mind stops dividing experience into conflicts that require constant resolution. Instead, there is a unified perception where action flows from understanding rather than tension. This does not mean impulses disappear. They still arise, but they are no longer treated as commands or threats. They become passing signals within awareness, neither ignored nor obeyed automatically. This shift is critical because it removes the need for constant internal negotiation. Without negotiation, mental energy is preserved and clarity increases. At this stage, awareness becomes the central organizing principle. Awareness is not simply noticing thoughts or emotions. It is the ability to observe them without distortion. When awareness is strong, there is no confusion between what is experienced and what must be acted upon. This separation creates space where choice becomes effortless rather than forced. Flow begins to emerge naturally from this state. Flow is often misunderstood as a peak performance state reserved for specific activities, but in the context of self-control, it becomes more continuous. When internal resistance is reduced, attention aligns naturally with action. There is no fragmentation between thought and execution. The mind and behavior operate in synchrony. In this state, effort is not absent, but it is no longer experienced as friction. Actions still require energy, focus, and engagement, but they are not burdened by internal conflict. And this is why tasks that once felt heavy begin to feel smoother. The change is not in the task itself, but in the internal relationship to it. Another defining feature of inner autonomy is the reduction of reactive patterns. Most people live in cycles of reaction, responding to external events, emotional triggers, and internal impulses without conscious direction. As self-mastery deepens, these reactive cycles weaken. Instead of reacting, there is a pause of awareness followed by intentional response. Over time, even this pause becomes minimal because clarity becomes immediate. Attention at this level becomes highly refined and stable. It is no longer constantly shifting or fragmented. Instead, it can rest fully on one point without strain. This stability of attention is what allows deep work, clear thinking, and sustained presence. The mind is no longer consumed by unnecessary internal noise, so perception becomes sharper and more accurate. Emotional experience also transforms further. Emotions are no longer disruptive forces that influence direction. They are simply part of the landscape of experience. Joy, discomfort, tension, and calm are all observed with the same level of awareness. Because they are not resisted or exaggerated, they pass more naturally without creating lasting disturbance. Inner autonomy also changes the relationship with time. Instead of feeling rushed or delayed by time, there is alignment with it. Actions occur in rhythm with intention, not pressure. There is less sense of urgency driven by anxiety and more sense of timing driven by awareness. This creates a smoother progression through daily life. Importantly, this stage does not imply the detachment from responsibility or reduced engagement with life. On the contrary, it allows deeper engagement because energy is not wasted on internal conflict. Attention is fully available for what is happening in the present moment. At its core, beyond control mastery is not about eliminating structure, but about internalizing it so deeply that it no longer feels restrictive. Structure becomes invisible because it is fully integrated. Discipline no longer feels like discipline. It feels like clarity in action. This is the final evolution of self-control, a state where behavior is not forced, not resisted, and not constantly managed but naturally aligned with awareness. In this condition, life is no longer a series of struggles to maintain control. It becomes a continuous expression of clarity, presence, and intentional action. Beyond control lies something quieter and more stable, not the absence of discipline, but its complete integration into awareness itself. Chapter 14, The Silent Advantage, Becoming Unshakable in Any Environment. At this level of development, self-control is no longer something that needs to be proven, defended, or even consciously maintained. It becomes invisible in its operation. From the outside, nothing dramatic appears to be happening, yet internally there is a profound stability that shapes every decision, response, and direction. This is the silent advantage, the state where discipline is no longer noticeable as effort, but as consistency in behavior under all conditions. Most people operate in cycles of fluctuation. Their behavior changes depending on environment, mood, pressure, or external influence. In one setting, they may appear focused and composed. In another, they may become reactive, distracted, or inconsistent. This instability is what creates vulnerability in decision-making and inconsistency in life outcomes. Unshakability begins when internal structure becomes stronger than external influence. This does not mean external conditions lose importance, but rather that they lose control over behavior. The environment may change, but the internal response remains grounded. This stability creates a form of independence that is not dependent on circumstances being favorable. One of the key elements of becoming unshakable is emotional neutrality under pressure. Emotional neutrality does not mean absence of emotion. It means emotions no longer distort perception or dictate behavior. In high-pressure situations, most people experience emotional amplification. Stress feels stronger, urgency feels overwhelming, and decisions become reactive. At this level, emotions are observed without allowing them to take control of direction. Another defining factor is the ability to maintain consistency in attention regardless of distraction. Distractions will always exist. The difference lies in whether attention is captured by them or simply aware of them without being pulled away. In an unshakable state, attention is stable enough to remain anchored even when surrounded by competing stimuli. This stability creates a major shift in performance. Tasks are no longer interrupted by internal fragmentation. Focus becomes sustained, decision-making becomes clearer, and execution becomes more efficient. The mind is no longer divided between multiple competing priorities in a chaotic way. Instead, it operates with clarity and hierarchy. Unshakability also comes from the removal of internal justification cycles. In earlier stages, individuals often negotiate internally before acting, debating whether to proceed, delay, or avoid. This internal negotiation creates hesitation and weakens consistency. At this level, decisions are made with clarity, and action follows without prolonged internal conflict. Another important aspect is adaptability without instability. Being unshakable does not mean being rigid, it means being able to adapt to changing conditions without losing internal structure. Many people confuse flexibility with inconsistency, but true mastery involves adjusting behavior while maintaining direction. The structure remains intact even as the form of action changes. External validation also loses its controlling influence. In unstable states, behavior is often shaped by how it might be perceived by others. This creates dependency on approval or avoidance of disapproval. At this level, action is guided by internal alignment rather than external reaction. This reduces unnecessary pressure and increases authenticity in decision-making. Another subtle but powerful shift is the reduction of emotional reactivity to failure or success. In earlier stages, success may create overconfidence, and failure may create discouragement. In an unshakable state, both are processed as information rather than identity shifts. This keeps behavior stable regardless of outcome fluctuations. Time pressure also becomes less disruptive. Urgency still exists, but it no longer distorts thinking. Decisions are made efficiently without collapsing into panic or hesitation. This creates a steady rhythm of action, even in fast-changing environments. Perhaps the most defining quality of this stage is internal independence. Behavior is no longer dependent on external reinforcement or conditions. Discipline is not activated by motivation, pressure, or inspiration. It is sustained by internal structure alone. This creates a form of freedom that is quiet but powerful. There is no need to constantly adjust to external instability because internal stability is already established. Life continues to change, but the center remains unchanged. In essence, becoming unshakable is not about becoming unaffected by the world. It is about becoming internally structured enough that the world no longer disrupts direction. It is the point where self-control becomes so deeply integrated that it no longer feels like control at all. It simply feels like stability in motion. Chapter 15. Mastery in Action, Turning Self-Control into Life Performance. At this stage of development, self-control is no longer a concept to understand or a system to maintain in isolation. It becomes something that is expressed continuously through real-world performance. This is where internal mastery meets external execution. Ideas, intentions, and discipline are no longer theoretical. They are reflected in how a person thinks, decides, communicates, and acts in daily life. Many people misunderstand mastery as a mental achievement alone. In reality, a mastery only becomes meaningful when it is visible in action. Self-control that does not translate into behavior has no practical value. The final stage of development is not about thinking differently, but about consistently operating differently under real conditions. At this level, performance is no longer dependent on fluctuating motivation. Motivation may still appear, but it is no longer required to initiate action. Behavior is driven by structure, identity, and clarity. This removes the instability that comes from waiting for the right feeling to act. Action begins because it is aligned with direction, not emotion. One of the most important aspects of mastery in action is execution without delay. Delay is often a hidden form of resistance. It creates distance between intention and action, which weakens momentum. In a mastered state, decisions are translated into action with minimal gap. This does not mean impulsive behavior, but rather immediate alignment between decision and implementation once clarity is present. Another key element is precision in behavior. Actions become more deliberate, efficient, and structured. There is less wasted effort, fewer unnecessary movements, and reduced internal confusion. Each action serves a purpose and contributes directly to an intended outcome. This level of precision reduces friction in performance and increases overall effectiveness. Communication also becomes a direct reflection of mastery. Words are chosen with intention, not reaction. Speech becomes clearer, more structured, and more impactful. There is no need to over-explain or over-justify. Meaning is delivered efficiently, an unnecessary complexity is removed. This creates stronger influence and clearer understanding in interactions. Decision-making at this stage becomes streamlined. Instead of prolonged internal debate, decisions are made through a clear evaluation of priorities and consequences. The mind no longer gets stuck in cycles of overthinking. Clarity replaces hesitation, and direction replaces uncertainty. Emotional stability continues to play a central role in performance. Emotions still arise, but they no longer interrupt execution. Pressure, uncertainty, or external challenges do not derail action. Instead, they are processed internally, while behavior remains aligned with intention. This creates consistency even in demanding situations. Another defining feature is adapted consistency. And this means maintaining direction while adjusting methods based on context. The goal remains stable, but the approach is flexible. This allows performance to remain effective across different environments without losing coherence or structure. Energy management becomes highly refined at this stage. Instead of constant output, energy is distributed strategically. High-focus work is balanced with recovery, ensuring sustained performance over time. This prevents burnout and maintains long-term effectiveness without decline in quality. Importantly, self-control in action removes unnecessary internal resistance. Tasks that once felt heavy or mentally draining become more natural because resistance has been reduced through repetition, structure, and alignment. Effort still exists, but it is no longer accompanied by internal conflict. Feedback loops also become more refined. Instead of reacting emotionally to outcomes, results are observed, analyzed, and integrated into future behavior. This creates continuous improvement without destabilizing performance. Each action becomes part of a larger learning cycle rather than an isolated event. Ultimately, mastery in action is the point where internal discipline and external performance are no longer separate. What a person thinks, decides, and does becomes aligned in a continuous flow. There is no fragmentation between intention and execution. At this stage, self-control is no longer something applied consciously in every moment. It becomes embedded in how life is lived and how actions are performed. The result is consistent output, stable direction, and effective engagement with reality. And this is the practical expression of mastery, where self-control is not just understood or maintained internally, but fully translated into real-world performance that is stable, efficient, and intentional.